All right, so here we are talking about the future of humanity as it's concerned with space exploration and exploitation and energy generation. With me tonight, I have my brother, the half-heartless heathen.
I mean, at this point, most people probably just know me as Justin anyway.
Okay, wasn't sure. So we're just going to be having a very broad, very loose discussion on where we see humanity going in the coming decades, and put specific emphasis on where we're going in space, how we're going to get there, what's going to happen when we get there, and what's going to happen with energy production and how we're going to harness that as the decades go on.
So to clarify, we're speaking optimistically where we hope humanity will go in the next few decades.
We can express our hopes and also our pessimism. I myself am a pessimist as far as how things are going to go.
I mean, pure pessimism would lead me to believe, we're all going to be dead within a century anyway, and we're never going to make it off the Earth.
Yeah, well, that doesn't make for a very interesting speculation.
I mean, unless you talk about the interesting ways in which that could happen.
Okay, you want to start off with that then?
Nobody seems to buy Robot Apocalypse, but that's like nowhere near anything on the docket unless you want to talk about that.
Well, robots are going to have power. So in order for something like a robot apocalypse to happen, I would assume they would have to have more efficient energy generation than we have now. What do you think?
I mean, in a sense, you really only need the one artificial intelligence. I mean, if you just have one true artificial intelligence just kind of remote controlling a whole bunch of different machines, I mean, yeah, sure, you're going to need a supercomputer to run that thing, but I mean, once we figure it out, we could even like the first ones will probably just be the size of large buildings. I mean, it's not like we need to invent some sort of new power source to fuel an artificial intelligence, I don't think. I mean, we don't have an existing artificial intelligence to point to as an example of what their power consumption is, but I highly doubt we would need some new form of energy generation just to make one work.
Yeah, I myself, I'm not very familiar with AI insofar as the actual production of it. I do know that it's coming. They're making very big strides in it year after year, but I also know that quantum computers are going to make a lot of those tasks a lot easier and a lot more power friendly, and we really only have tiny quantum computers at the moment.
This would actually be a great opportunity for for you to both educate the audience and me, because I have no idea what the hell a quantum computer even is.
I'm not very well versed on that topic either. I just know that because of quantum superpositions, it makes a lot of calculations something like faster or more efficient, or they're actually able to function differently than our current processors do. Just in short, they are much better at everything computing-wise versus our current computers.
All right.
So if you were going to have an AI, you would want a quantum computer because it's probably going to be able to do more, I guess, more organic thought better than a binary computer. I'm trying to speak smartly when I'm very ignorant on the topic, so forgive me.
I mean, hell, this would probably be a good way to segue into a question I always like asking. How exactly would you define humanity Like, do you think it has to be biological humans, or would you consider, like, say it did happen, and say some sort of robot apocalypse, but like, say it wasn't exactly like all of a sudden. Say it was rather gradual. People undergo cybernetics. People like most people become cyborgs, but we also have artificial intelligence, and eventually that line becomes so blurred to the point where there's really no functional difference anymore between just a highly modified human and somebody that was just constructed. I mean, are we still calling that humanity at that point?
As far as my concerns for what I want to talk about here, yes, I would call that humanity. Someone else eventually would probably define it differently and say, oh, well, at this point, they stopped being human and they became this other thing, whatever that is. But as far as this discussion is concerned, I would say humanity is what we understand humanity is now and everything it will become in the future.
Now, what if it was kind of all of a sudden? What if there was some extinction of humanity, but our machines survived us, and they were completely artificially intelligent, and they went on to colonize the stars? Would you consider that good enough? That pretty much like the legacy of humans lives on, even if we don't?
I mean, it's something, but at that point, humanity is over. But I guess as far as this discussion is... Go ahead.
Well, if we're going back to pessimism, I tend to think that that's what's going to happen. That sometime within the next 100 years, we are probably going to develop and end up getting wiped out by artificial intelligence. And if it has a goal programmed into it that would lead it to desire resources, it would go out and colonize the galaxy. So in a sense, the legacy of humanity would live on, colonizing the galaxy, but it wouldn't be us. But I mean, by that time, I'm going to be dead of natural causes or other things anyway. So
then I guess as far as this discussion is concerned, I will demand a little bit more optimism than that. We're going to say that humans are not going to be extinct in any of our hypotheticals, that somehow, yes, we do beat, let's say, climate change, and we do not get wiped out by the coming robots and AIs.
Fair enough.
But I will be very pessimistic as far as other things go, like the way that the free market tends to govern things now and kind of impedes social growth, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one that always comes up whenever we talk about post-scarcity, that like even if we ever reach a state in civilization where it's a possibility, like humanity as a whole has access to the resources to become a post-scarcity society, I highly doubt society would allow us to become a post-scarcity society.
I disagree that society won't let us do it. I think there are just other factors that are a part of society that will cause it to be delayed. I don't think it'll stop it from happening, but I think it will severely delay it.
I mean, can I ask a philosophical question on the issue then?
Go ahead.
Do you want a post-scarcity society?
Ultimately,
strange as
yes,
this might sound.
But personally, I find that very, very hard to wrap my head around because I know everything would be different. And I don't know that I personally like the differences, but it's not like it would happen overnight. This is something that society will gradually get into.
Honestly, I find that concept more terrifying.
The gradual change.
If if you just took the entire whole population of the Earth right now and shoved them into a post-scarcity society where they no longer have to want for anything, that people can, everyone can quit their jobs, everyone can be lazy, robots do all the work for them, anyone that wants anything can just go order it and have it. People will at least Those people would at least remember what society was like now, appreciate those things, and maybe go on to like further themselves as people now that they have the time to fulfill the goals that they've always wanted to accomplish, more creative goals. But I feel like if we gradually evolve into that and people just get like people are born into this idea of a post scarcity society, I'm terrified of what that might do to creativity. When from the day that they're born, people don't have to do anything.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know what will happen there. I guess when I think about post-scarcity, I always envision society kind of coming together and acting a lot more logically, and everything just kind of becomes about overall survival of the civilization. But whenever I think about those concepts, I tend to lose sight of the individuals and stuff like the arts. I really haven't thought about it. That would be a very interesting topic to get into some other time.
Two things there. I struggle to believe that humanity as a whole could ever actually reach a point where they, actively seek what is good for humanity and are all on the same page about how to do that.
Well, hive minds, and once we get into the cybernetics thing in futurism, then hive mind, networked consciousness, all that type of stuff will end up where everybody is on the same page, because that's the only way they can be.
That is terrifying.
I don't really find that terrifying.
That is a loss of individualism, which I personally find terrifying.
Well, personally, it's very, very different, so it's very hard to wrap my head around how that society would actually look and feel. But overall, when I look at the whole of history and futurism, I see it happening, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. Take philosophers from 800 years ago. If you were to have painted a picture of what society looks like now, a lot of stuff that we do now would probably have horrified them. And it looks like I have just lost my co-host to technical issues. And we are going to go to intermission while we wait and figure this out. Oh, are you back already?
I closed my browser. It's still running high on the CPU, but at least I can hear you now.
Oh, okay.
If you would like to give me enough, if we can just pause, I'll restart my computer. I could call on my phone in the meantime, but the audio quality would probably suck.
Yeah, go ahead and call on your phone. I'm gonna switch over to the intermission.
Okay. I will be right back then. Can you hear me? say something.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, hold on. It's off. I'm on my phone right. Okay. So yeah, I'm on my phone right now. Shutting off my computer right now.
All right, then we are back.
Oh, we're okay. How's my audio quality?
You're a little fuzzy, but you're audible.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, as far as futurism goes, it is something that I would like to talk a little bit on at some point, but as far as this discussion is concerned, I want to look more in the coming decades. What do we see happening soon? One thing that has fascinated me pretty much since I took physics in high school was fusion power. And recently I heard about ITER, which is supposed to be turned on in 2025. And if ITER does what it is supposed to do, it is going to output 10 times more energy than it takes to run it. That means we will have the basis for commercially viable fusion power. So if we take it as a given that we will have commercially viable fusion power sometime in 2025 with an input to output ratio of 1 to 10, where do you think that carries us in the coming decades?
Well, I mean, like we talked about the last time we talked about this in person. I mean, that's definitely not going to be like, no one's going to have their own personal fusion reactor. This is still going to be like power plants. So it is in large part still going to be like government-run stuff that has access to this power. I mean, of course, people on the power grid, but see, here's where my pessimism kicks in again, and I can already tell, it's nuclear power. It is technically nuclear power, and that word alone is going to scare people, and people aren't going to want to do it.
That is true, but
green energy, stuff like solar, stuff like wind turbines, like that's already in large part a better alternative to burning fossil fuels, and yet people still, like, not even just like, rich billionaires that profit off of it, but just, people on the bottom that have been tricked into thinking that, it's better, will still champion fossil fuels. And I can't help but fear that even if we get fusion power going, people are not going to switch to it, at least not right away.
no, I don't think it'll happen right away. But ITER is a prototype, basically. Very, very large, but it's still a prototype. So if that gets turned on and it works, it itself is not a power plant. So it's going to need to be reconfigured to actually build a power plant out of it, get it hooked up to the energy grid. It's probably going to be done somewhere in Europe. That's where ITER is right now. And some lucky country in Europe is going to have the first fusion reactor. If everything works out, I would say before 2030. So if we actually have something that works and they're able to do tests, they're able to give tours, there will be people trying to make sure everybody in the world knows about this and knows that this is the better way to go forward. Do you think that will help, or do you think there's already going to be too much against it?
I mean, regardless of how long it takes, I mean, unless we kill ourselves before that, obviously it's going to become standard eventually. It's just a matter of how long that's going to be. But another question is, what exactly is the fuel source? I know you're going to say hydrogen, but I mean, we had a conversation in person a week or so ago about like what exactly type of hydrogen and how exactly we go about getting just like pure.
Did your audio just cut out again, or was...
Did it?
Oh, it sounded like it. Yeah, so I looked into it after that conversation, and water is not a bad fuel source. Everything I looked into, it's going to do pretty well. And actually, it's not exactly the water that you want. You need to find the H3. And we have quite a bit of it, and it's a possibility to make more. But the bottom line is fuel is not going to be a problem for it.
This is kind of an aside, but you know, say we get fusion reactors, and you know, it's such cheap renewable fuel that it may as well just fucking print energy, right?
Well,
so we are not.
It still requires fuel input, but all of the water that we have on the planet would last the Earth even at massive energy consumption rates beyond what we do now. It will last the Earth billions of years beyond when our star dies. So
anyway,
once we get there, fuel is not a problem.
Anyway, say we get these things going. We're not hurting for the fuel. We effectively just can have massive outputs of energy now without, you know, having to worry about energy consumption. That is, correct me if I'm wrong, that is the main issue in producing antimatter, right? How much energy goes into it?
Yeah, and then one thing we would be able to do, because again, energy is a big concern about doing stuff like getting up into space. That requires a lot of energy. Well, if we have fusion, that becomes an easier possibility. A lot of stuff works a lot better in space. So we have the Large Hadron Collider, and it works. It's worked for many more experiments beyond finding the Higgs boson, which is what it was designed to do. But if we're able to build one even bigger out in space somewhere, that would be able to give us even more, and that is where we would be able to do that process as well.
One second, I'm going to switch back over.
All right.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, so as I was going to say, you briefly mentioned in there that energy is a main concern in getting into space.
Well, it's one that we have solved, but it's still a factor.
But I mean, currently, you know, it is a major expense how much fuel we're burning to get into space, and then how, like, the high percentage of mass of the actual ship itself that needs to be dedicated to fuel. But you also have to consider thrust there. So even if we have fusion-powered spaceships, does that produce enough thrust to get out of the atmosphere? And if so, how?
Remember what fusion is. Fusion still expels energy, and I am sure somebody will be working on a way to A, turn it into a weapon, and B, turn it into an engine. I don't know too much about the actual mechanical parts of a working fusion reactor. I do actually know that there is one design that actually functions much like a combustion engine, with moving pistons and everything. So, knowing that, I'm sure there is something that fusion can be used for to go directly from fusion to thrust. But that's the extent of what I know there. So I wouldn't be able to talk about details of how that would actually look or function. But on the flip side, if we have fusion power, that means we're able to use a very small amount of fuel, mass-wise, to power a lot of things for a very, very long time. So if we worked on building a space station much, much larger than the ISS, and we actually had production up there, this is where I see potentially SpaceX or any newcomers that are going to come into the coming space race in the next couple decades. That's where it's all going to go. There's a lot of manufacturing that can be done in low gravity that works a lot better out there than it does down here. So we're not going to be importing cheap stuff from other countries anymore. We're going to be importing it from the sky. Fusion power is going to make a lot of that much, much easier.
Could you give an example of something that is easier produced in low gravity?
Well, a lot of printing would be a lot easier to do in low gravity, because all of your moving parts no longer have gravity affecting them. There's going to be a lot less wear and tear on your moving mechanical parts for doing CNC printing and milling and things like that. Your scraps are probably going to make a mess because your parts are going to be flying and floating around everywhere. But
would people really consider that worth it, to essentially like haul their entire factory into orbit?
It probably wouldn't be hauled there. It would probably be built there. And this is why I've been saying for the last 5 or 6 years that the first thing that we are going to do in space is asteroid mining. That's why I find it kind of dumb on Elon Musk's part that he wants to put feet on Mars. I think if he's really looking forward to where the next step is in space, it's not getting to Mars. It's getting to an asteroid and getting it back over here.
I think the reason that is most people's focus is that once we finally do that, that's going to just open people's eyes to the possibilities and get more people interested in space again. Because we haven't really been excited about space since the moon landing.
I agree, but looking at it from a fiscal point of view, Mars is going to be a waste of money. It's not necessarily going to be a waste of time. We're definitely going to learn a lot getting there, because landing on Mars is a very, very difficult task. But if we do get there...
I think you're thinking too logically about it, and I think the reason is entirely emotional.
I agree, and I'm not saying that my way is how it's going to go. I just personally think it's a stupid direction to take it first. Because if we do get to Mars, you're going to have a lot of cynical people that are going to say after we do get there, because it will happen, if we put our heads down and we go for it, it's going to happen. You're going to have a lot of people after that say, okay, good job, now what? And really, what does Mars have to give us
I think,
that we can't already get with the rovers?
Yeah, I think the issue is, I think the point is re-sparking interest. Because, yeah, much like back in '69 when we landed on the moon, I mean, then I'm sure people asked, too, okay, now what? Like, it did nothing for us. It was a waste of money. There was no point in going to the moon. But I don't think you're going to meet a single person, that actually believes that we landed on the moon, that thinks it was a stupid thing to do. Because I don't know, it proved how far humanity can go. Putting feet on the moon then suddenly extended how far humans have gone. Putting feet on Mars will further extend how far a human has gone. Going out and sending some automated mining ship to go bring back crap from an asteroid doesn't, like, when people think about that, they don't feel like humanity has gone any further. We've already sent probes out to the edges of the fucking solar system. We have close-up pictures of Pluto, but people don't really think that we have gone any further than we did 50 years ago.
I agree. And yeah, I am trying to think more logically.
So here's the thing now. If SpaceX is very serious about what they're going to do, and I mean, I'm sure Elon Musk realizes like the profit and just like the benefit to humanity of mining the asteroid belt. But here's the issue. When NASA landed on the moon, that was as far as we could go at the time. Like, the moon is pretty damn close to us relative to everything else out there. It was out of the question to go further right then and there. But if we put feet on Mars, and then people are saying, all right, now let's go further, right now. Now you've entered an era that humanity's never been in before.
I agree, but also getting to an asteroid is going to be a much easier task than getting to Mars. Because we don't have to go to the asteroid belt. We have asteroids local to the Earth that are just kind of hanging out. The asteroid belt is not the only source of asteroids in the solar system.
You know how I first heard about SpaceX, and at the time I think there was another one that was trying to do a like private space exploration. You know how I first heard about these companies?
How?
They were talking about like essentially selling tickets so that people could go to space, go to the moon, and eventually go to Mars.
Virgin Galactic.
Yeah.
Yeah, they bought that one guy's like falling leaf design for their little jumper thing.
That is what gets attention. That is what got people to look at SpaceX. That is what has gotten them in the limelight now. That is what has gotten all this fucking hype behind space exploration like we haven't had in 50 years. Yeah,
and I agree.
You talk about asteroid mining, you're not going to get as many people thrilled about it. You're going to get nerds like us interested, but you're not going to get the public interested.
Yeah,
and if that's the goal, if the goal is making humanity care, then I get it. I get effectively wasting money trying to get to Mars. Because that gets average people psyched.
Then it has to be simultaneous, because as soon as you go all in going to Mars and then you get there and there really is no plan after that, or even if you do have a plan of, okay, now that we've done this, now we're going to go do this other boring thing over here, then you're just going to lose everybody's interest because they just wanted to see us get to Mars and now you want to go haul rocks.
Well, yeah, why can't we do both? I mean, people are already talking about, once we get to Mars, like, setting up some sort of long-term colony there.
That's going to be a difficult one, but that would be very, very interesting.
I mean, I don't think the idea was a huge colony. I think they were just talking about, like, sending 12 people there to just live on Mars for, like, a year or something.
They have to have an exit strategy then, because getting off of that planet after getting there is going to be quite the feat.
Well, less difficult than getting off of Earth.
Only slightly.
I mean, gravity is the major issue. Earth is thus the most difficult solid planet to get off of.
Correct. But how do you land on Mars with enough fuel to reach escape velocity?
I don't know. I don't know what exactly you need there. I don't know how the percentages work out because Mars is about it's about 1/3 Earth gravity.
Well, you have to start backwards. So, last, you want to launch from Mars. So you have to calculate how much mass you need in your rockets in order to do that. Okay. Well, before that, you need to be able to land safely on Mars, which means slowing your descent enough, carrying all that mass, and doing so where you don't rupture any of your fuel tanks, and making sure you don't explode when you hit the bottom. Now, luckily, SpaceX does have those very cool landing boosters that they've figured out now, where they go up, they detach, and then they land back on the ground by themselves. So the technology is already there. It probably needs to be tweaked a little bit to cover entry and landing a much larger object than they're used to landing. But the technology is there. They just have to figure out all of the coordination and fuel. Now, the biggest issue is how much fuel you're going to need to reach escape velocity from Earth, because you have to carry all of that out of Earth. And the more fuel you add, the more weight you add, which means the more fuel you have to add. So this just starts growing exponentially. This rocket would be the largest thing we have ever built on this planet. Potentially so large, we may not be able to build it on this planet.
I mean, I really don't know exactly what the plan is, and I only vaguely know the details of this.
Well, this is also another reason why I advocate for going for asteroids first. Because do you know what the majority of asteroids contain?
Metal.
Ice.
Mm.
And if you take ice and you break it down into its fundamental elements, you get oxygen and hydrogen. That means rocket fuel and breathable air.
Yeah, if you have equipment to process that. Do we have... I mean, clearly we don't currently have technology that you can just, take ice and turn it into breathable air and rocket fuel. Otherwise, we wouldn't really be having fuel worries.
Well, if we are able to do that, and also, remember, if we can figure out fusion, well, we've already figured out how to do fusion. We just haven't figured out the ratio quite right.
But, you're talking about what you think SpaceX should be doing right now. And currently, we don't have fusion. But you still think that they should be going to asteroids.
Well, you just have to target the right asteroid.
That's a further trip. Granted, you don't need to burn fuel to travel through space. You really only need to, escape a gravity well and then get up to speed. So I guess it being further away is just more time consuming. But you're saying that should be automated, right? Like an unmanned crew, or do you think people should be going?
To the asteroids?
Because now you're talking about having people living in zero gravity for a very long time.
Where are you talking of going? Mars or the asteroids?
No, the asteroids.
Well, there's
asteroid
asteroids. I think there have been asteroids found like around the same distance as the moon. Or maybe only a little further out. We would have to wait until we're in better range. It's not just like something you can just go and find one.
And I'm curious, people always talk about going and like mining or hauling back asteroids, but like, okay, maybe mining them, sure, I can get. You go there, you mine some stuff, you come back, but honestly, I feel like I don't know if just mining some materials off of an asteroid and coming back was really worth the expense of getting to it. I feel like you would want to bring the whole damn thing back with you, right? Am I wrong?
Ideally, probably. By the way,
okay,
I just looked it up. Water splitting is a thing. We do it. We've already figured it out.
Okay, but clearly it's not like producing fuel in high enough concentration that we can, bring ice with us instead of solid hydrogen.
Well, it's something that we have figured out.
Okay, I'm just saying, like without the fusion power that we previously mentioned, that's worthless for rocket fuel.
It's not useless for rocket fuel. That's how you would pull the hydrogen out of water.
Okay, but I'm saying for like... that doesn't do anything for the people already in space. You haul that back, you haul a shitload of it back, and eventually you can piece together enough for one more rocket ship.
Yeah, I don't know how much a single asteroid would carry.
But anyway, I'm kind of curious. If we're talking about hauling entire asteroids back to Earth, we're now talking about re-entry with an asteroid, right?
No, you would park it in orbit.
I wonder how that would be viewed. Because that is potentially a weapon of mass destruction.
It is. Quite possibly, this can only be done if we get at least a majority of the world powers to come together on a project similar to the ISS.
I mean, I guess normally I would say that sounds impossible, but I mean, I guess,
It happened with the ISS. It's been happening with ITER since the 90s. Yeah, the Cold War was freshly over when the United States and Russia both joined the ITER project.
We're talking about SpaceX, which is a privately owned company. We are essentially talking about giving a privately owned company something as powerful as nukes. I know we're just talking about large rocks, but dropping gigantic rocks from orbit is, I mean, that's what killed the goddamn dinosaurs.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't like it either, but the way everything is set up right now, unless we get funding back to NASA, and we get NASA and all of the other space agencies to work together, it kind of looks right now that SpaceX is the only one that is going to be capable moving forward.
See, this is why, I mean, I hate to, I hate to, after we had a good thing going of just talking about hard science, to now talk about sci-fi. But this is why I liked where we were going with Infinite Horizons, of the idea of a private company essentially going and just colonizing, we used Mars, could really be anywhere, but going and colonizing somewhere that, no one has legal claim to. So no one actually has legal jurisdiction to stop people from going, and like a private company from going and just starting a colony on Mars that's independent from Earth governments, and then just building the shit there. Put the rocks in orbit around Mars. Build it all in space stations there.
Now that is actually something we could do. I hadn't even thought about that. Because we can do manufacturing in Earth orbit, but that's not to say we're restricted there. We could actually put it in orbit around Mars. Maybe build the refinery around Mars.
Which, by the way, is closer to the asteroid belt.
This is true.
So maybe that's the answer. Build all this crap in Mars orbit, not here.
Yeah, and then we don't really have to worry about
giving us a
magnetic
reason to go to Mars.
Yeah, but putting feet on Mars isn't even a necessity at that point. You just need to get into Martian orbit and then build a couple satellites.
Good Lord, do you know how much that would just kill people to be in orbit around Mars? And humans have never set foot on it? No, it's going to happen. If we're in orbit around Mars, we're touching it.
Yeah, but check this out. You know how much easier it would be to put feet on Mars if we had a space station around it? A space station with manufacturing capabilities, no less?
I mean, yeah, I definitely think, hell, I more than anyone think that space stations are the future. I don't think honestly, at this point, like, I used to think that we should be trying to, like, find a way to get to other solar systems and colonize exoplanets, but at this point, I feel like it is much more likely and much easier that we're just going to build a crap ton of space stations and live on those.
Yeah, that's all we're going to do. If humanity lives long enough, we're going to build a Dyson swarm. It's already been started.
What do you mean?
Well, technically, as soon as you start putting several satellites around something, you've already started your Dyson swarm.
Yeah, but wouldn't the definition of a Dyson swarm be orbiting the sun? I mean, I know technically it's all orbiting the sun. Don't be a smartass. But you know what I mean. Directly orbiting the sun, not in something else's orbit that is orbiting the sun.
Well, yeah, I guess so, but because technically, yes, everything is orbiting the sun, you still have to coordinate everything to not run into each other at some point. We've already got it kind of figured out. The way we make our satellites and all, surprisingly, all of these world nations communicate well enough to be able to say, yes, our satellite's here, our satellite's there, they're all traveling at these velocities and these vectors, and collisions are kind of rare. Mainly collisions happen with trash. So we're already kind of on the way to all of this. But it is slow going. But we are in a very interesting time where a lot of stuff may be right around the corner. It's kind of funny. I thought this was going to end up being a lot more pessimistic, but I'm actually coming out of this a lot more optimistic about looking at the next 15 to 20 years. We may actually be doing a lot more in space than I originally thought we were. It's all going to be done by private corporations, but still going to be something.
I mean, at this point, who cares? I mean, can you really say that you prefer private corporations over the government? I feel like both have quite enough negative connotation that at this point I really don't care.
Yeah, the way things stand now, I guess you're picking one of two evils. I don't even know which one is worse.
I mean, yet again, I'm still convinced that in the future the two will be indiscernible anyway.
Yeah, I
know
for different politics, but I'm kind of hoping futurism concepts in futurism beat a lot of it out. But that's my hope.
I know that this is bringing up something that, if there is an audience watching, that none of them will know what the hell I'm talking about. But this was something I always liked about Miriani. I always felt that was something kind of realistic about it. That, like, there weren't even governments anymore. There were just these three giant mega corporations that ran everything. They went and colonized planets. They became the new governments.
Yeah, it's a very common concept in science fiction, because you look at the way the world is now. Yeah, you look at the way the world is now, and you just extrapolate out. It's very likely.
The fact that Disney World is technically a city just frightens me.
Yeah, we may already be on our way to that too.
Yeah. Yeah, if this ever happens, if we ever have, like, companies running nations, Disney's gonna be first.
Disney's just gonna stay here and keep Earth.
They'll start a literal empire. The crown will be a fucking Mickey Mouse hat.
Alright, well, I think that's a good spot to wrap it up.
We're ending on Emperor Mickey? Alright, cool.
Emperor Mickey Mouse.
Alright.
But yeah, like I said, I'm feeling a lot more optimistic than I thought I was going to coming out of this. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like in large part we were looking at the most optimistic outcomes and not necessarily.
Yeah, well, you wanted to hypothetically kill everybody right off the bat, so that just doesn't make for a good conversation when you're talking about keeping everybody alive. So short of killing everybody in the first 5 minutes of the conversation, yes, I came out of this a lot more optimistic than I thought I would.
I definitely like the idea of building shit in Mars orbit.
Yeah, I think what I'm gonna have to write down for another topic is manufacturing in space.
And we heavily dabbled on it in the beginning until you re-diverted the conversation off of it, but clearly I apparently really want to talk about transhumanism someday.
Yeah, I'll probably get to that. I wanted to more focus on keeping it in local time scales, because a lot of that stuff is very likely to happen, but much further down the road. Well, yeah, transhumanism might actually start to happen, but full-on cyborg-type stuff, not until later.
Even the most pessimistic estimates by like actual experts in the field place the singularity at 100 years away. And that is like the furthest away I can find estimates. Closer estimates put it like 40 to 60.
Now, is that where we have become one and it's indiscernible? Or is that just
I don't know if that's
man
necessarily
and machine has
like,
been mixed?
I think the idea is essentially that we'll have like a good enough understanding of the human body and artificial intelligence that we could both produce artificial intelligence and successfully like reprogram or transfer human consciousness. Though I would argue that transferring is essentially just cut and paste.
Well, yeah, it would just be cut and paste, because I know
like
a lot
Star
of people
Trek
don't.
Transporters.
I know a lot of people don't like this, but yes, we are meat machines. That's all we are.
I prefer squishy computers, but okay.
Yeah, same difference.
It's just funnier to say squishy. Anyway. Meat machines, though. I like that.
Meat machines. I forget where I heard that, but I liked it. So I just started saying it.
I don't know why now I'm just picturing meat from Mortal Kombat.
Oh, God. Alright, well, on that note, meat from Mortal Kombat and Emperor Mickey.
crowning meat from Mortal Kombat as Emperor Mickey.
Alright, well, on that note, I think we are going to shut it down. And this was a good conversation. Looks like we had a grand total of absolutely nobody watching. And hopefully we do a little bit better next week. Alright, good night, YouTube.